All right, let's talk about three buzzwords you hear absolutely everywhere: AI, machine learning, and deep learning. They get thrown around so often, you'd think they all mean the same thing, but they don't. And when you unpack them, you actually find this incredible story, an evolution of how we're trying to teach machines to think.
So, what is the real relationship here? Are they just different names for the same thing? Or is it more like Russian nesting dolls, where one fits inside the other? Let's clear this up and map out exactly how they all connect. To really get it, we have to start at the beginning, with the big idea that kicked this whole thing off: artificial intelligence.
So, AI, that's the whole grand project, right? The massive effort to create systems that can act intelligently. And early AI was all about rules. A perfect example is IBM's Deep Blue, the computer that famously beat the world chess champion back in '97. It was an amazing feat, but it could only operate in this perfect, sterile world of a chessboard, where every single possibility was based on hard-coded rules programmed by humans. And that brings us to the big problem. That whole rule-based approach, it's just really brittle. The second you take it out of that perfect, clean environment and put it in the messy, subjective real world, it just shatters. I mean, think about it. How could you possibly write a fixed set of rules to identify every single piece of spam email or to recommend a medical procedure? It's just way too complex. This problem showed us that we needed something new. We needed AI systems that could learn on their own. And that, right there, is the breakthrough of machine learning. Instead of being programmed for a task, a machine learning system gets its own knowledge just by finding patterns in tons of data. It's exactly how your email sorts spam, not from a giant rule book, but because it's seen millions of examples of what's junk and what's not. Okay, but finding patterns still sounds a little bit like magic, doesn't it? How does a machine actually do that? Well, the secret sauce is something called representation. And this slide, this lays it all out perfectly. It really is like those Russian nesting dolls. The biggest doll, the whole field, is artificial intelligence. Inside that, you've got machine learning, which is the part of AI that learns from data. A really important piece of that is representation learning, which is all about letting the machine figure out for itself what features matter. And then, right at the very core, you have deep learning, which is just a super powerful way of doing that.
So now we're finally at the heart of it. What's the deep in deep learning all about? Well, it all comes down to the incredible power of layers. Okay, this is the big aha moment. This is how a deep learning model actually learns to see. It all starts with just raw pixels, a meaningless jumble of dots. The first hidden layer doesn't see a car at all. It just learns to find simple things like edges. Then, the next layer takes those edges and combines them to find slightly more complex things, like corners and curves. Then the next layer assembles those into recognizable parts, like a wheel or a window. And finally, the output layer puts all those parts together and makes the call. That's a car. It builds a really complex idea, step by step, from a whole hierarchy of simpler ones. And this quote just nails it. Deep learning takes one huge, complicated problem and breaks it down into a series of smaller, simpler problems. It's not one giant leap of logic. It's like climbing a ladder, one simple, manageable step at a time. So we've covered the how, but now let's talk about the why. Why is this layered approach such a game changer? Well, the impact in the real world is just massive. I mean, we're talking about using deep learning to design new drugs, to hunt for tiny subatomic particles in these huge datasets from physics experiments, and even to automatically build 3D maps of the human brain. And of course, it's the engine that powers all the object and speech recognition we use every single day on our phones and computers.
So, if you're going to remember one thing, it's this. Deep learning isn't just a slightly better way of doing things. It's a totally new approach that lets us solve problems that are just way too complex and nuanced for any human to ever sit down and write a fixed program for. And that leaves us with a pretty cool question to think about, right? We've just seen how a machine can learn to understand the world by breaking it down into this hierarchy of simple concepts. It really makes you wonder, what are the fundamental building blocks of our own understanding? Something to chew on.